Ladies and gentlemen, in the past few hours, we've seen the second wave of US and UK-led airstrikes, this time into Yemen, where the central commands of those two countries are suggesting that 36 targets in 13 locations have been hit, including in the Yemeni's capital, Sana'a. The Houthi rebels themselves say that 48 targets have been attacked, including in their capital. This, of course, comes on the back of what happened on Friday, where 85 locations were struck in Iraq and Syria by the Americans through missiles. Now, just before this, another airstrike took place in which the Americans claimed that they targeted cruise missile bases that the Houthis were operating. This time they claim that they have hit weapon depots, they've hit drone facilities, they've hit storage facilities, and Lloyd Austin has come out and said that the objective is to severely diminish the capacity of the Houthis to target either through drone or through missiles shipping in the Red Sea. There are a few questions that come from this. The most important is has that actually happened? Has the Houthi ability to continue to harass shipping in the Red Sea been significantly diminished? The second question is this the end? Is that it? If the limited strikes had to take place after what you've seen in Iraq and Syria, now in Yemen itself, is it done, or are we expecting more strikes to take place? Similarly, are the Houthis done, or are we expecting them to continue the escalation? They vowed, at least, that they intend to continue. Let's open up this conversation. Joining us on the broadcast, Professor Madhav Nalapat, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdeva is with us. Major General Dhruv Kato joining us, Vailabad joining us, and Jordan Cope on the broadcast with us as well. Jordan, what do you make of this? Is it done? Are we done? Are we going to expect more strikes? What has the conclusion of this actually achieved?
I can only quote, I think, what Biden said previously during his recent round of airstrikes, which is, did he expect them to succeed? No. Will he continue? Yes. The United States needs to continue its strikes in the region in both Iraq and Syria and Yemen and wherever Iran's proxies may be. But more importantly, it actually needs to target the source of these proxies, Iran, who provides them with funding and often training as well. And so unless we inflict pain upon the source that is actually providing the funding and the training that is causing disruptions to global shipping supplies, that is backing the proxy groups and terrorist organizations that backed Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and their friends, we're not going to see any results. And this is what the U.S. Central Command spokesperson said. He was not satisfied that we didn't go far enough ultimately with our airstrikes.
So, Jordan, it's not like the Iranians are, they might have an agenda, but it's not like they are floating around in unlimited wealth as well. There's a reality check that bailouts have been received from Russia and China in the last 1 year. So who's actually doing the funding? Is it Iran doing the funding, or does the money get channeled through Iran?
I would certainly say that Iran's behind it. It's the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And the Houthis ultimately align with Iran's vision of Shiite Islamism and ultimately promoting a Shiite revolution throughout much of the Middle East. And so for ultimately to help disrupt what Iran's ultimate goal in this current conflict is, which is ultimately to interfere with Israel's right to defend itself after it was attacked from another Iranian proxy on October 7th, at least in terms of funding Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These proxies have effectively sought to disrupt Israel's ability to defend itself, and as well to disrupt America's ability to get involved. And now there's the American blood on the hands.
The irony in all of this, of course, being that the number one impact, immediate economic impact, is felt by the Egyptians, who are going to lose out on the revenues that come from operating global shipping through the Suez Canal. Vailabad on the broadcast with us also. Mr. Abad, what do you think is happening now? Is this done? Is there a sparring match that had to happen? It is concluded, or are we seeing dangerous points of escalation remaining?
Well, I think as long as you take the course into your own hand, unilateralism and exceptionalism in the American foreign policy have created more trouble in the region rather than have solved any problem. There is only terrorism has been spreading from Afghanistan to Iraq to Syria to Yemen to Libya is all because of the American faulty of changing regimes. So by militarization of the Red Seas, you are not solving the problem. In fact, you are increasing and you are adding fuel to the ongoing war, which is going on the Israelis, on the Palestinians. So therefore, I think what we need to solve, it took the American Rishab 24 hours to condemn Russia and to stand with Ukraine. It took them 24 hours to 4 months with the war on the Palestinian, not even to call for a ceasefire. But 48 hours, they say Houthis are causing a problem. So if you wanted to stop the war, basically you should stop where the cause of the problem is, and let us go and solve the problem of the Yemenis, where the Yemeni problem have been there for the last 9 years with the war, the coalition that the American-led Saudis war on Yemen have been taking part, and they have been bombing continuously. So therefore, if that Yemeni found a reason to halt the Israelis' act on the Palestinian, let us solve the Palestinian problem at the first place, and then we can do the other side. Because by increasing the number of attacks on these ships, you are causing a trouble to the global trade, to the oil trade, and also you are involving other players in the region, where you will be causing also the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. All this will be disturbed. So what are we trying to do here? Are we disturbing we are bringing the global affairs, the international players in this region because we are saving one country, or are we trying to find a solution to the Palestinian problem and stop let other people playing this card?
I'm not readily seeing an end game here or a way out. We haven't seen a conclusion in what's happened in Ukraine. We're not seeing movements towards some sort of conclusion, at least an interim one in Gaza, and we are seeing an escalation here. Professor Nalapat, what do we make of this? Is it a to and fro, a sparring match that had to happen, and this is the end of it, or are we expecting more serious levels of escalation?
Well, I'd like to say that the Houthis are committing suicide by their attack on shipping through the Red Sea. It's one of the main arteries for shipping in the world, and it's extremely crucial to international trade that this artery remain open. The Houthis have behaved in a very self-destructive way by trying to interdict this kind of shipping and by these attacks. Now, what is being done against them? From the point of view of the United States, there have been nearly 200 attacks on American facilities. 3 American soldiers have died. If Joe Biden did not act, I can tell you, Joe Biden would be impeached, including by his own party. So I'd first like to say that any country that does not accept the reality of Israel as a fact of life in the Middle East is a country that is doing immense harm to itself. And Iran is a country, for example, that has done immense harm to itself by its policy of saying, no, by one means or the other, you can eliminate the state of Israel, including by helping various groups. But I would like to point out, it's not only Iran. I mean, our Israeli friend named Hamas. Well, guess which country the leaders of Hamas have been staying in? It's certainly not Iran, not one of them. I don't think any of them are Shia. They're staying in Qatar. They're being given a lot of, if I may say so, support by Turkey. And so the problem is a little more complex than Iran. So far as Iran is concerned, yes, the mullahs are absolutely, I don't want to use any nasty adjective, are unrealistic when they launched, since the time of Khomeini, this existential attack on Israel. And the biggest sufferers of that attack have been the people of Iran. They have paid the price for this. But I'd like to say it's a lot more complicated than what we are seeing. Neither Al-Qaeda nor ISIS are Shia. And, I would not, for example, go after the Shia as a group or the Sunnis as a group because of the fringe within them. And certainly I believe that Iran, I have said it from the very beginning, Iran, frankly, has made a big mistake in propping up these proxy groups and frankly, in giving them arms, weapon, and money. But the reality of the situation is very clear.
Okay.
I do not believe that the Iranians were directly responsible for this. And if the war is carried on into Iran, that is going to make it a regional conflict. And all of us, including Israel, are going to suffer. And may end by saying, Rishabh, Israel is a perfect right to defend itself. After what happened on October 7, they have a perfect right to defend itself. And that is the fundamental problem, which I think people need to understand.
Okay.
The right of the people of Israel to their own country. That right has to be acknowledged by all.
Okay, all right. Ambassador Sachdeva, the question here is, we are watching the levels of escalation happen rapidly. Now, do we spot any invested parties readily looking at de-escalation? Because I can't see it right now. It looks like there are going to be more attacks from the Houthis. It looks like the Americans will be forced to escalate their attacks. Then the pressure will be that unless you do something in Iran, nothing is going to happen. And where do we see this going, sir?
Thank you, Rishabh, for allowing me to speak. I think it's very important to understand that each one of these sides is not without motives. They have their own rationales, they have their own reasons. Houthis are not doing it out of nothing. They have carved an image of themselves as they want to go beyond a non-state actor and become equal to the entire Yemeni countryside. They want to represent the country. And this escalation allows them to behave like one, make demands. And now people are going to pay attention to what Houthis do. Earlier, they were not. Now, secondly, I think it's also important to see that Iran's handling of the proxies has its own method in madness. Iran is now safe while proxies do the bidding for Iran. So now the only common determinant between what others have said and what I'm saying is that the key to peace in the region lies with Iran to some extent, but also to the other side. So that if Hamas-Israel war stops at whatever terms, ceasefire or peace, humanitarian pause, etc., all these raison d'etre of Houthi attacks would stop. Houthis have said as much. Hezbollah has said as much. And Iraqi and Syrian Shia militants have said as it is. They have said that they are doing it because Hamas and Gazans are suffering. So that is where one has to look for.
Okay, all right. General Katoch, same question to you, sir. It seems to be now on a spiraling, escalating curve. Most likely it's going to become a lot more toxic. Are we looking at a generalized front line now? That it's not limited to one area, it's limited to several countries. The American retaliatory strikes have happened in Syria, they've happened in Iraq, now they've happened in Yemen. The Red Sea has a direct bearing on Egypt, as I mentioned. There is a crisis continuing in Israel. It has a direct bearing on us. We are sending more and more naval vessels to patrol these lanes. Are we seeing a generalized crisis now?
Thank you, Rishabh. Rishabh, the way I see it is, this sparring is going to continue for some time. And we will have to wait to see whether it goes out of control or not. As of now, I think it is within control. But the crux of the problem remains that there are some countries who are not willing to accept the reality of Israel, the way Professor Madhav has narrated. Now, if you do not accept the narrative of the existence of Israel, I'm afraid this conflict is not going to stop. And because for others, it may simply be losing a little bit of territory or losing lives. But for Israel, it becomes an existential question. And this is one of the reasons why Israel has always opposed Iran going nuclear, because the Iranian leadership, including their Ayatollah, have consistently stated that they will kill every single Israeli and push them into the sea. Now, if the highest leadership is going to talk of genocide, I think it is incumbent on the part of the Israelis to accept it. Now, we can look into the Israeli Gaza question or the Israeli Hamas question. Now, it's all very well to say, listen, why should Israel continue their attacks? But if you go one step back further, why did Hamas carry out that attack on 7th October where they butchered civilians, women and little children? It was an act of humanity which I personally can never forgive. And it was something which I feel the whole Muslim world should have got together and said, this is un-Islamic. They didn't do that. They went and supported these attacks. And I think that is where the crux of the problem lies. You want humanity from one side. You don't want it from the other side.
Okay. So the question
It's
then
not
is,
going to work with-
the question then is, Professor Nalapat, why would the Iranians be interested in the escalation if it is that the bottom line lies with them? Certainly, where are the weapons, the funding, the munitions coming from? Some say the funding comes from Iran. Some say all the missiles that went to Hamas were made in China. We don't know. Why would the Iranians be want to escalating this? What's in it for them?
Put your finger on the problem, Rishabh. The problem is, frankly, China is very interested in creating crises around the world. And China is sitting pretty because now it has got a captive supply of petro products, which is Russia. Now, you have this Ukraine war, which in the beginning some of us had said is going nowhere, and it is going nowhere. And so China has got that. And they have an interest in creating fires around the world so that the Americans get distracted and other democracies, that is India, get distracted. And any fire that starts, they verbally say, oh my God, this should stop, when actually doing everything to help spread the war. I mean, you look at the Chinese media, you will think that Hamas is the victim of terrorism, not that it is a perpetrator of terrorism. So you're perfectly right on that particular point. Having said that, I want to point out, so far as Iran is concerned, the reality is, let me be quite frank here, the reality is that the Americans, frankly, we're not talking of NATO as a whole, just the Americans, have the ability to, in a matter of days, reduce the big cities of Iran to what Gaza is today. The government of Netanyahu was provoked beyond a point, and it has reacted. It has reacted very sharply, given the temperament of Mr. Netanyahu. I think that was to be expected. But the reality is, as General Katot said, the spark that lit the explosion was the October 13 attack, which is unconscionable. Iran, I can tell you, Iran is going to be in the position of having its big cities destroyed, attacked. Why? Because of proxies that it has built up to basically create problems for the state of Israel. The sooner Iran accepts the reality of Israel and stops assisting such proxies, the better, including, if I may say so, groups like Hamas that are not really Iranian proxies because they're not Shia. They are Wahhabi, and they have nothing to do with the Shia.
Okay, I don't want to oversimplify the issue which has been going on for several decades, but Jordan Cope, the question is still a simple one, even though the answer I appreciate will be complicated. What's in it for Iran right now? I know there's a historical grievance and issues, and they want to stub their nose at America. And it's not like the Americans don't come and do an assassination here and there. For sure they do. The sanctions are still on. But why would Iran want to do this at this point of time? What's in it for them?
There's several potential motives why they would want to do this. First and foremost, as Iran is nearing enrichment capabilities towards a nuclear bomb, it might want to test Israel's resolve via that of its proxies at this time. The other potential motive that was reasoned was Iran potentially wanted to stop Israel from normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia that were due and impending. Iran views Saudi Arabia as its arch nemesis in the region. And while Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad may represent Sunni Islamist elements, it's important to note that Iran's ultimate and greater vision for the Middle East is one that promotes its infamous Shiite crescent vision. So removing Israel at all costs, even with the help of Sunni proxies, ultimately remains a goal of its own. But there's so many other motives. There might also be some foreign actors at play to test the United States' resolve in the region. especially as it nears a nuclear bomb, and especially when the US said it would pivot more towards East Asia under the recent administration, and to see whether it would actually do something in the Middle East and North Africa, where Iran has been expanding its influence.
Okay.
And so, yeah, indeed.
Okay, so I buy into the argument, and Ambassador Sachdeva, I buy into the argument because we were at the cusp of October 7th. What was happening in the run-up to October 7th? You had a G20 summit that was taking place in India, and the IMEC corridor was being announced. You know, you were at the cusp of the Abraham Accords. You know that the Israelis just opened, an embassy in Abu Dhabi. So in that regard, if that was the motive, have they been successful? Is any rapprochement, any conciliation through the Abraham Accords now possible?
I think it's a question of normalization of the current hostilities. If everybody believes that this would continue to simmer at a manageable level, then Abraham Accords and their expansion is fine. In fact, the latest news that one has yesterday is that Saudi Arabia is relying on a land corridor to ship its oil up Red Sea, in the north of the Red Sea, and then go to the Suez without touching the lower Red Sea where Houthis are active. So the land corridor is being used to ship the oil through east-west pipeline. It's also being used to ship goods going through. So India, Middle East, Europe corridor, in a way, is already in existence.
Okay.
Israelis are also doing the same thing. They are using Dubai as a port through land border in a small and discreet way. Trial runs are on. And Houthis have, ironically, by threatening to close the Bab el-Mandeb, has made it even easier to rationalize this.
Okay, irony that suddenly you need more trade via Saudi Arabia, which of course is the major part of the land route of the IMEC corridor. Okay, so let me get General Katoch back into this conversation. General Katoch, in a very real sense, as we see an escalation taking place, what does India do? What is our stakes? You've just seen, and not coincidentally, I'm sure, India's Foreign Affairs Minister returned from Tehran. You're seeing the Indian Navy doing, and I don't say this lightly, unprecedented, almost on a day-to-day counter-piracy operations, counter-insurgency operations in the Red Sea. At least 5 vessels are publicly known to be deployed. Beyond that, what else has been sent, we don't know. So what do we do? Because many people may have remembered this. In the budget speech, the finance minister said, our trade is now a strategic priority for us. Hence, you're seeing these reactions. What's our finger in the pie, sir?
No, I think if India aims to become initially a $5 trillion economy, and then we are moving towards 10 trillion, and by 2047 we are looking at 30 to 35 trillion, it has to be through the oceans. There is no other way we can do it. So for us, this is a strategic interest, which is why, as you have mentioned, we are concerned about what is happening in the Red Sea, and a very large portion, a significant number of ships are at the moment deployed there in anti-piracy operations. You see, there's another problem which is going actually as far as the Red Sea is concerned, because the Houthis have threatened, the fiber optic cables which runs below the Red Sea.
Yes.
They have threatened to cut them off. Now, if you cut them off, this entire communication link between Europe and West Asia, it gets cut off, and of course, that linkage goes on to America, goes on to Africa. So what is ultimately going to happen is this is going to be a very, very serious escalation. Houthis, of course, can't do it, which means that Iran will do it, but the proxies will be the Houthis. For India, we will have to keep up our diplomatic channels and put pressure on Iran to de-escalate. I can't see any other thing which India can do at the moment. We will continue with our anti-piracy operations. We can continue to keep the sea lanes open along with the other cooperative navies.
Okay.
But beyond that, we cannot interfere into the fight.
Okay.
So we have to put diplomatic pressure on Iran.
Okay, so let me quickly sum up what has happened. India has come out at the very onset in very vocal support for Israel its right to exist and the right to defend itself. This is vocal. Subsequently, now over the past few weeks, our position is promotion now of some sort of a peace arrangement, even if it's a humanitarian pause. At the same time, Indian supplies, civic and aid supplies to Gaza have been continuing. There was an Indian judge at the ICJ that gave a ruling which was not a charitable ruling, but not to the extreme that many people of the proponents from South Africa certainly were hoping. And why the South Africans moved this is a separate conversation in itself. Now, as I mentioned, it's not a coincidence that India's foreign minister has just come back from Tehran. It is a certainly act of policy, very public policy, that we are conducting anti-piracy operations against the Houthis. And if you assume they're Iranian-backed, that is happening publicly. But we are not vocally criticizing Iran, with whom, of course, we have an association and have been buying oil from. It is more than an inconvenient problem for India. It is inconvenience at the very least. We wish this was not the issue. We wish this was not happening. But now it's happening and we are stuck with it. Professor Nalapat, it was more than a wake-up call when a drone attack came near the coast of Gujarat. You never heard of something like this before. That drone could not have come from Yemen. It had to come from Iran or somewhere thereof nearby. And that was a ship heading towards India. That I don't think has been taken kindly by India at all. What do we do, sir, with the problem we wish didn't exist?
Well, first of all, we do what we have been doing, which is deploy our armed forces, especially in Navy. And may I point out, Rishabh, so far as Iran is concerned, there was a path to denuclearization. The nuclear deal was scrapped by President Trump. Then what happened? You had this disastrous Afghan pullout by President Biden. And these two, in conjunction, have basically empowered, if I may say so, anti-Israel radicals across the region to believe they can get away with the kind of atrocity they committed on October 7. And that continued, I mean, with the captives, etc., up to, I'm told, around October 13. So this is the point. The point is the error made first, if I may say so, in the sense of withdrawing from a deal that was putting Iran on a path to de-escalation. Now the moderates, Rouhani, etc., are completely discredited in Iran. And the mullahs have regained credibility because they've said, look, Rouhani tried. There was a deal and it was torn up. So what are you talking? You can't trust the United States. And the second thing is this pell-mell put out from Afghanistan, gifting Afghanistan back to the Taliban, a terror force. These two actions of the United States have caused immense damage to democracies everywhere. And I think, therefore, Indian foreign policy needs to be commended. On the Ukraine war, we have our own policy. On the Gaza situation, we have our own policy. On every situation, we have our own policy. And the fact is that anybody who expects India to follow the mistakes of others, whether it's the United States, whether it's any other country, well, under Prime Minister Modi, that's not going to happen.
Okay. Okay. General Katoj, not necessarily a problem created by us. I can safely say not a crisis that we want or need. We are not looking for an interruption to global supply, especially through waters through which 95% of India's foreign trade takes place. So we don't want this problem. We have our own strategic interest in keeping the waters open, which we are policing for the second time, but more vociferously than we did with the Somali pirates. So what do we do? What's in our interest? What's our policy then?
No, I think our policy is based on two basic principles. One is to keep the sea lanes safe and secure. That we will do through our own Indian Navy and in partnership with other countries. The second step is diplomatic. I can't see any third step really taking place at the moment. So the diplomatic efforts, as far as India is concerned, are ongoing and continuous. We don't want this conflict to escalate. We hope that it doesn't escalate. We hope it dies down completely. But I think we will be able to handle it if it is just simmering and floating above the water, even if it doesn't completely go away. And I think our political and diplomatic efforts will be directed towards that end.
Okay, Jordan, I'll leave the really difficult question with you to end this. What is now the state of affairs in Gaza? At what point of time will it become tenable for the Israeli Defense Forces to think of beyond what's been happening over the last few weeks?
Well, first and foremost, there's something we haven't discussed yet, which is the 100+ hostages currently in Hamas captivity in Gaza. And until Hamas releases these hostages, Israel has no impetus to stop. And it also has no impetus to continue to allow Hamas to remain in power after it has pledged to attack Israel again and again and again since October 7th. If we want to talk about a resolution to what's going on, people keep saying that Iran has only escalated recently. No, it's been escalating the region in recent decades by building up this proxy network and by activating them right now to try to interfere with Israel's war efforts going on in the region. So what do we ultimately need? We need the world to take a much tougher stance on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to target IRGC commanders, to send the message to Iran that it will no longer be able to act with impunity in the region. Strength is what's needed, and the US also needs to list the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, a stronger listing than that which we're currently listing them.
Okay, so for people watching the broadcast, it is in our naivety that we assume that most people want peace, most people want prosperity, and things go wrong, but everybody is actually trying to sort them out. The truth is that sometimes there are players and actors, for reasons best known to themselves, who want the crisis, who want things to burn, who want flashpoints, who want them to become internecine and unsolvable, because having chaos is part of the strategic policy. Now, who those people are and why they're doing it, and until a large part of that gets addressed, we are in a global Cold War, ladies and gentlemen. These are all front lines, whether we like it or not. So why Hamas still has 100 hostages, even though Gaza is ravaged right now by the Israeli Defense Forces? Why are they holding out? And what bases are they holding out? For whom are they holding out? Worth thinking. So, unfortunately, no good news. There seems to be no end in sight. This is going to become much worse before it becomes any better.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.